Hello everybody, welcome to Dakman Productions and welcome to Conahey Rail. This will be basically a update video, and because of that I'll be handling my camcorder, so it may be unshaky at times. I won't be using a tripod because I'm just doing a little documentary here. So with that being said, after watching a YouTube channel called The Train Freak. He's HO, but you can take HO, S scale, whatever, and apply the same thing to your gauge. So I've been watching The Train Freak, and he's been building this wonderful yard facility, and he does switching ops and switching operations. And he's been showing some different tracks that he's building, bypass tracks. So watching him really inspired me to do some updates and upgrades to my own grain yard facility, which when I do switching operations on Conahey Rail, which is an O gauge high rail layout, those videos get a lot of views. But I want to do more things and different things, and be able to do a lot more than what I'm doing now. Which I know some of you are saying, yeah, well, that's unbelievable, because O-gaugers usually like to run in a circle. Not all of us. There's some of us that like to do switching, and I'm one of them. So I set my layout so I can run in circles, like most of us O-gaugers, or I can do switching operations. So let's get started here. So what's one of my upgrades going to be? So we have main 1 and main 2. Main 1, main 2. So I can come across main 1 onto main 2, but I have no way of getting back on again. So I want to be able to jump on in both directions. So I want to add a switch here and a switch there, so I'm able to get on either or in either direction. So that's improvement number 1. The next improvement I want to make is I want to be able to I'll put this over here so you guys can see. I want to be able to have a siding here. I went online and found out that there's some facilities called corn syrup transferring facilities. And I want to create a small miniature one on a smaller level. So this will come into a siding for my corn syrup transfer facility. And last but not least, and there'll probably be more as I keep doing this, I'm going to put this over here. Let you guys see that. So that's going to be a siding for my crystal ice house that I built a few years back. I want to be able to park refrigerated cars in front of that, make them look like they're getting, well, loaded. So this will add a lot more features, and then I'm not sure how I'm going to do it at this point in time in the video. We'll see, because we're not done yet. But I want to be able to go from main 1 and main 2 on this side of the layout as well. So we'll see how that pans out later on, if it does. So those will be the updates for right now. Also, I don't like how I wired this. I'm going to rewire this. I tried to solder my own connections and stuff, but I didn't like how it turned out. So I'm going to be using these Gargraves terminal ends. And so I'm going to redo all these switches over again using terminal pigtails instead. And I think it'll come out a lot nicer. Well, if I'm going to get this done, I better get started, but I won't be documenting any of this. I'll just show you guys what it looks like after I'm all done. So, let me get to work. See you guys later. Alright, so we're back. Work in progress here. So this is the day after I started. And you can see things are messy, which they're going to be. So let's do a recap of what I did here. The original plan was to install the two switches over here, which I showed you guys. But then a switch over here. But then it became, okay, let me rewire this first because I wasn't happy. And then things just sort of snowballed from there. And I ended up spending 10 hours on this layout on Saturday. So let's do a recap of what I did here. So when I went to rewire this, I was like, okay, well, now's the time to change something if I want to change it because I have it apart. So I did that. I decided to take, and I'm handling this camcorder, so sorry if it gets shaky. So I decided to take this switch, or actually both of these switches. I decided to take these switches and move them back. So it sort of looks like the Ross four-way switch. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, Sean, you should have just installed the Ross four-way switch and just be done and over with it. Yeah, I could have done that. But I was seriously considering the Ross four-way switch. However, after measuring it out, it just ended up being too long for me. That and they're like $400. I can do a four-way switch of my own cheaper with the Gargrave stuff. So once I moved these two switches back and piggybacked them to make it look like a four-way switch, I had a 6-inch gap over here, which you can see where I put that little short section of track in. So I had a 6-inch section, or a 6-inch gap. So I went ahead and decided, okay, I want to realign that track, which you can see where it originally was. So I realigned that track and put in my 6-inch piece. However, when I went to do the yard part of it, I had to realign that as well. And so I put a fresh new section of track in there into the yard. So now it's a straight run behind the silo instead of coming out and moving over and coming back in again. So now it's a straight run in. Since my delivery track is not here yet and it's supposed to have been here Saturday, I used the section off mainline number 1. Alright, so that brings us to the next debacle. So originally I had an 027 switch in here. So I put it back in there. And once I put the 027 switch back in, I'm like, I don't want this. I don't want an 027 switch. I have 0-100 switches. Why would I have an 027 switch? So playing around with it, I used a couple different switches playing around. So I found that a right-hand switch worked the best in this area. So of course, after doing that upgrade or change, I don't know if you want to call it upgrade. I guess you could. Anytime you go larger in a radius, I guess it's an upgrade. So once I did that, the crossing no longer matched, because you can see the crossing originally was right here. So now, not only that, but the original switch, which went across the road, and I'm not sure if you guys can see the outline or not, but here it is here. Here's the outline of the original switch. So the original switch sat here and went over that way. Well, that was also a left-hand switch. But if I took the left-hand switch and moved it to where this one's at, then I was creating an S-curve, a tight S-curve, which you never really want to do. If you're going to make an S-curve, it's got to be long and sweeping. You can't come off of like for example, an A72 curve going right and then going into a left-hand A72 curve, or even over 100. S-curves really don't work, short ones. So, I decided to, instead of a left-hand switch, I put in a right-hand switch, which changes how number 2 main line runs. Now, as you see, I have not completed at this point in time what my original plan was to install switches between main 1 and main 2. As anybody knows, the mail is held up, and it was supposed to arrive Saturday, and I probably won't get it until Monday now. And so I'm looking at next weekend because my work schedule's been so busy. But so what I did is I put in temporary pieces of track so I could at least run one train, which is on main number 2. Alright, so what makes these Gargraves switches so difficult? I'll show you. Alright, I'm going to give you guys a good example here. Let's say I want to put this switch right there. Okay, here's the problem with Gargraves. Gargraves switches do not flow electricity. They only flow to a certain point. Alright, so what we have here, I'll grab my screwdriver here so you guys can see. So what we have here is the center rail. So once let's say your feed going in here. Okay, you have power coming in here. It's going to flow to right here and stop. If your flow comes in the other direction, the flow comes in here and then stops. Same thing here. The electric comes in here, the flow, and stops. So once your trains, your locomotives come across the track, you know, your rollers will pick up power from right here. But the problem is, depending on how many switches you have and how your layout is wired, is how you're going to wire up the switch. So let's say you already have one of these switches in your layout. Now you have to run a jumper from here to here to here for your power. So you got to run feeders or a jumper to your power at all 3 sides. Now once you do that, it's also depending on how your layout is wired, if you have to run a jumper or a feeder to your common. So let me show you what happens here. Let's say you made this rail your common or return. So once it comes through here, as you can see, the common's okay if it's going in this direction. So the common is okay as long as you're going in this direction. But if you're going straight, as you go straight across, the rail actually stops right here at this, what's called a frog. So the common connection is broken. It doesn't flow. So now you have to run a feeder to this rail for your common or return. So yeah, Gargrave's track can be a pain. There are people say, you know, use Ross instead. And they're right. Ross is a much better switch. But I've had good luck with the Gargrave's 0100 switches. Not so much with their 042 or 054. I was not happy with them. But these run pretty reliable for me. And I think the oldest one is like 3 or 4 years old. So, for me, since I'm not a club and I don't run a lot of rail traffic, Gargrave's is a good choice for me for right now. If you're running, a club layout, having a lot of rail traffic, people visiting, running different trains all the time, then maybe, yeah. And not only that, I can almost buy 2 Gargrave switches for the price of 1 Ross. But, yeah, one day maybe I'll switch to Ross, but not right now. Alright, so there's that update and recap. So the next thing is, even though I'm using a meter to check myself to make sure, and here we go, I'll show you what I'm using here. I'm using this meter here to check and make sure that all my connections are correct and phase and I've got a good electric flow. Now, remember, this will check to make sure you have flow, but it doesn't check to see if it'll take a load. So, like, let's say you didn't properly solder something and it's got a loose connection. It'll still show that it has power, but once the locomotive gets on there and it pulls like 2 or 3 amps, then the power will drop out. Otherwise, in other words, the load will make it drop out because it can't support it because it's got a loose connection. So that's one of the things you learn the hard way. So once I, get done, before I get too much further with ballasting and stuff like that, I run my train through it. So let's do that. The first thing I want to do is make sure the train runs through the yard. And this is the train for my corn syrup train video that I'm using for testing, which is kind of perfect because it's short and it's a single locomotive. And this train is a lot more forgiving for testing. Alright, so hopefully we make it across those switches I just put in. Alright, so we did good there. Alrighty, let's test the yard. Now you'll notice all my switches are manual. I like being hands-on. Even though in most of my videos I make them look like they're automatic, but it's funny what you do in editing. Oops. Alright, before I move that into the yard, I have to throw this switch over here so we don't derail. Okay. Come across the road. Looking good. Come across that switch. Okay. Alrighty. So it made it through. Alright, you gotta throw a couple more switches because we're not done testing yet. That one. This one. And now we'll move it forward. Make sure it moves through that area. Okay, looks good there. Back to back out. Alright, throw a couple more switches here, so we'll change this one again. Through this one. I love being hands-on. Some people just want to sit behind a computer or a controller and throw the switches. That's fine for those who are like handicapped in a way, but I like being hands-on if possible. Okay, that's testing good. Now, I have that track on a switch over here. So when this thing's parked in the yard, I can actually turn this locomotive off. And I'll show you guys that. So now I can have this locomotive parked in the yard while I have the power still on to main 2 and run trains. And when I want to run the yard, I can just turn the yard power on with this switch, which is actually hidden by this post office building here. You guys don't normally see. So there's the post office building. And I just picked that post office building up. I throw the switch. That turns the yard on, put it back on, you guys don't know it's there, blah blah blah. And it throws the locomotive back on again. Let's start it back up. This switch. And by the way, my short line, they throw all their switches. There's nothing automated on my short line. Just wanted to put that out there.
Tire down, going to beam.
Alright, so at this point in time, we tested every point of the yard that I have rewired and reinstalled. So everything's up and running, it's working as it should. And it's kind of funny, 10 hours into this, and I haven't even installed the new stuff that I wanted to get to install. Because I'm waiting for new leads. I'm waiting for track, which was supposed to be here. I still got plenty of switches yet. So, we'll update once all that stuff comes in. I'll probably just make one update video with this and let you guys see what I was doing and why. And hopefully you guys get to see it come together. To be continued.